The Hudson River. New Yorkers have always extolled its natural beauty and simultaneously exploited its natural resources. This is Storm King Mountain on the Hudson River. 200 years ago, Washington Irving described a scene like this of the lordly Hudson moving on its silent but majestic course. Around the same time, the English artist Thomas Cole, who painted this mountain, called this landscape Eden. Those were already nostalgic points of view. Even then, commercial shipping, industry, tourism, and the demands of the giant city down below were transforming this into an intensely used and fought over landscape. In 1825, when Thomas Cole arrived, steamboats were already bringing tourists to hotels in the mountains. The Erie Canal was completed, opening up the river as a thoroughfare for commerce and industry. Over time, the river was lined with railroad tracks, quarries, factories, and power stations. By the 1960s, it was a toxic sewer of industrial and domestic wastes. It's been cleaned up a lot since then. So, Matt, this is beautiful. What are we looking at here?
Well, we're on a park that projects out in the middle of the Hudson River. We're kind of surrounded by water on all sides. Haverstraw Bay is up there, Tappan Zee down there. It provides an incredible panorama of a long stretch of the east side of the river.
Matthew Coolidge has documented the impact of industry on the Hudson in a new book called Upriver. Croton Point Park is a good spot to see that impact.
The Hudson's been both a pastoral landscape and an industrialized one, and it's that kind of interaction of the two things that make it such a kind of rich and chaotic and interesting place. You wouldn't necessarily know it by looking at it from here, but just behind the hills there are big holes where trap rock and gypsum and other things are pulled out of the ground for industries.
Yeah, you've got that photo in your book, the aerial photo. Is it right behind that little bit of hillside right there?
Yeah, that hill with the cleft in it actually has a giant hole behind it. One of several quarries that are in this stretch of river.
But they left it, I mean, from here it looks like untrammeled nature, but it's an illusion really, isn't it?
Yeah, the view shed's been maintained. 1825, things were very different on the other side of those hills. What's elapsed in the past 150 years has been a total transformation of the landscape. The paradise, the Eden, is a construct.
Croton Point is kind of an illusion itself, a park laid on top of a giant landfill. So, in effect, this is a big garbage dump, right?
Well, more in effect, that's exactly what it is. And Westchester County's main dump for many, many years.
It's interesting to me that they picked this spot as far out in the river as they could get to do a garbage dump.
Yeah, well, the river was the backspace, the waste space, the away space, a place to put your power plants, a place to extract your gravel and cement, and a place to put your garbage.
New York City has long reached far up into the Hudson Valley for power, for building materials, for vacation properties, for artistic inspiration, and for drinking water. This is the Croton Dam. The old Croton Aqueduct begins down below. Built between 1837 and 1842, it provided millions of gallons of fresh water every day to New York City. And although the city has reached out in a lot of directions since, it continued to supply some of its water for more than a century.
This is the aqueduct. The water used to flow directly under us.
In Ossining, just downriver from Croton, a 19th century weir chamber controlled the gravity-fed flow of water.
All of the running water that fed New York City was going right through here.
So Croton is that way, New York City is that way, and the water would be swept?
By gravity. When it opened in 1842, they could have as many as 100 million gallons a day pass through here.
Right through here. And if we wanted to, we could walk to Croton?
We could walk to Croton, or most of the way to Manhattan.
The city reached out to Ossining in another way. Since 1825, it has sent its worst criminals up the river to Sing Sing Correctional Facility. The prison discourages curious visitors, but there's a small museum in town. In 1831, the warden of Sing Sing said the best prison is that which prisoners find the worst. No prison in American history has fit that bill better than Sing Sing. Over the years, the prison's guests have included the gangster Lucky Luciano, the spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, and the bank-robbing folk hero Willie Sutton.
This is our little vessel.
On the water today, you see a post-industrial landscape. As environmental consciousness grew in recent decades, the old smokestacks vanished and green hills reemerged, though many power stations still feed the metropolis. Even at the height of industrialization, romantic visions persisted. The fairy tale Bannerman Castle is a well-loved example. Who was Frank Bannerman, and why did he build this thing to look like this?
Frank Bannerman was a Scottish-American entrepreneur. He bought this because he bought 90% of the military equipment used from the Spanish-American War. And some of that was black gunpowder, and the city of Brooklyn and New York did not want it stored there. So he found this place in 1900.
But if it's a munitions warehouse, why does it look so beautiful?
Well, I think it was a product of the time. You'll find that Bannerman's was Scottish, and he loved Scotland, and he loved castles.
In his eccentric way, Bannerman was following tradition. The Hudson is a place people have been bringing romantic notions for a very long time. The Hudson River painters came here and saw God's wilderness. In the 19th century, men like Frank Bannerman came here and saw it as a place to build their romantic European castles on their American Rhine. We come here today, and those castles have fallen into romantic ruin. Romance and industry clashed here on Storm King Mountain. It's been the subject of countless paintings and photographs, and a target for artillery practice from West Point. In fact, a few years ago, they had to close it for a while to clear it of unexploded ordnance. In the 1960s, Consolidated Edison proposed gouging out a large section of the mountain to build a huge power and pumping station. Protesters, led by an environmental group called Scenic Hudson, killed the plan, and the cleanup of the river began. Art, industry, and environmentalism all come together in Beacon, where Scenic Hudson bought and cleaned up the waterfront and now plans to develop a green hotel there. Beacon Point, created by the artist George Trachis, is part of that transformation. So what was here when you first came here?
It was an abandoned railroad landing. Basically, it was an industrial site, and railroad tracks used to come right out to this edge, and boxcars just get pushed on the barges back in the 1880s. But when I got here in 1999, it was completely overgrown. One of the things I do on most sites that I've worked on everywhere in Europe and across this country is use existing conditions as a resource to build with.
So each one of these, so there's a pile, there's an old 19th century
There's an old pile right
here.
down below it, all of them, yeah.
What you have literally done is, it's an old industrial site.
Right.
And you took what was left that was useful, and still useful in the site, and built on top of it.
Right. And so it's a real refuge for a lot of local people to come out and not just fish and swim and use it as a kind of recreation deck, but just as a place very close to home to be able to walk out and really be far out on the river. There's not too many places on the Hudson that you can actually walk out on a public dock that isn't either commercial or a boatyard or a restaurant.
Nearby is Dia Beacon, a museum of modern art in a former Nabisco box printing factory. As factories turn into museums and environmental activists become hotel developers, the Hudson has clearly entered a new phase, one where the dominant industries on the river are now tourism, recreation, and real estate.